Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to the campfire. Looks like there's a good group of us here tonight. We've got some coffee flowing and a few drinks going around and a lot of conversations with friends, and there's some family, and it's a good time. Yeah, we got some stories to tell. You know, we started that Thomas Robinette story, the Bigfoot hunter. Well, Joe Flippo wrote that, one of our listeners. And we're going to go ahead and start on Chapter 3, Enter Leviathan. I think it's pretty enjoyable. I know some of you are already enjoying it, so we'll do a little bit more of it here tonight. And this is how it starts. Thomas had been enjoying a restful slumber for almost 6 good hours when his cell phone rang. He picked up his private phone, thinking that it may have been Sarah calling him to join them for brunch. However, that phone wasn't the one ringing. By the time he reached for his public phone, the call had gone to voicemail. So he went back to sleep, deciding to answer it when he finished resting. The number that dialed him wasn't anyone whom he knew, so he figured it could just wait. He had just settled back down when the number dialed him again. Rolling over, he covered his head with his pillow and tried to sleep. Now, after the 5th repetition of being called by this unknown caller, Thomas let slip an unnecessary swear word and rised up in the bed. He knew he wasn't going to get any more rest this morning. Boy, this better be important, Thomas answered his phone. Mr. Robinette, a voice on the other end began. My name is Emery Letson. I'm a liaison employee of Leviathan International. Now, it's imperative to my company that I contact you and have a conversation with you in person. Can you accept a visit today? Well, that depends on if you can chop or stack firewood, mister. What'd you say your name was again? Thomas replied. Letson. Emery Letson, stated the caller, and if stacking firewood's the price I have to pay to gain an audience with you, I will accept that. I'll bring a couple of helpers with me. Well, very well, Mr. Letson. Come at your soonest convenience. I assume that since you work for an international company, you already know my address, since you have my number. I'll be in the backyard chopping wood. Come on around, instructed Thomas. Very well, sir, Emery Letson replied. We'll be along shortly. Well, after about 20 minutes or so, a dark-colored SUV drove up in the driveway. Out of the vehicle, which screamed government issue, stepped 4 men. The driver stayed outside of the vehicle by his side of the SUV. The 3 remaining men, they walked determinedly towards the backyard where they could hear the repeated sounds of an axe chopping wood. Mr. Robinette, I presume, the middleman asked. Well, people call me Thomas, answered Thomas. I'm guessing that you boys are from the Leviathan International Company that you spoke about on the phone? Yes, sir, stated Emery Letson, and please call me Emery. This man on my right is Owen Flippo. As you can see, he is physically able to take care of that job for you. Now, his partner, Easton Gray, he can stack the wood. They are your help I brought along. Without taking his eyes from Thomas, Emery motioned for Owen Flippo to take over the job of cutting wood. His partner followed suit. Now, let's go inside and have a more comfortable seat. You can invite your driver in as well, if you don't mind. I don't want my neighbors around here getting antsy or anything. Government-type people who come around are usually trouble for them, Thomas stated. Emery waved at the driver, and he got back into the SUV driving seat. I have some coffee made if you're interested, Emery, Thomas offered as he poured a hot cup of coffee from the percolator. I'm fine, but thank you, Mr. Thomas, Emery politely refused the coffee. Okay then, what do you need to talk about that's so important that you can't wait until I finish chopping wood? Thomas asked bluntly. Well, sir, stated Emery, our company is a government contractor for the Department of the Interior. We have a situation that has arisen that requires us to find an expert on Sasquatch behavior. Now, before I can say more, I need you to agree to sign a non-disclosure agreement contract, and I have it right here, Emery Letson stated as he produced a stack of papers from his attaché case. Looking at that stack of papers, Thomas whistled. Well, I reckon my attorney will have to look over this before we can talk then, Thomas stated. Well, in a nutshell, sir, this NDA contract is basically legalese talk saying that you promise to not say anything to anyone, including your wife, about whatever information that you obtain while under our employment. I am authorized to give you this envelope attached to the NDA as soon as you sign this document, whether you take the job or not. I think it may be worth your while to look inside this envelope. Emery gave the envelope to Thomas, who immediately ripped it open and pulled out a check for $100,000. As Thomas looked at the check incredulously, Emery reminded him that all he had to do was sign the NDA, and the check was his without any strings attached. Well, he agreed to sign the contract. After his signature was procured, Emery dialed a number on his phone and told the person on the other end of the call to transfer $100,000 into his bank account. After hanging up, he instructed Thomas to call his bank and check his last transaction. He followed Emery's instructions and was amazed to see that he had actually received the money into his account. Now, while Thomas was calling the bank, Emery reached over and picked up the check and lit it with a Zippo lighter. "We won't be needing this anymore, Thomas. So can we get down to business?" Emery asked. "Well, absolutely," Thomas answered. "What's on your mind?" "As I mentioned before, my company is a contractor for the Department of the Interior," Emery explained. "When governments have a wildlife or a cryptozoological nuisance issue, we're called in to take care of the problem. So our company was created by an unnamed retired general who was in World War II, and he came upon some impossible creatures in North Africa. Now, after World War II, he left the military in order to go back and see if he could discover what it was that he saw on the Dark Continent. Through his investigations, he learned that the world is indeed much less known than we were led to believe. He spent his whole life finding and recruiting a certain type of soldier from every army around the world to take care of these animals and to capture them when possible for academic study, but kill them when necessary to protect the civilian population. Leviathan International has taken many jobs from across this whole world in the years since its inception. We have successfully done our job each time, until our most recent job. Do you mean to tell me that your company tracked me down because you don't have any Sasquatch experts?" Thomas asked almost mockingly. "I find that hard to believe. Heck, you don't have to hunt me down. You could have just searched the internet. There are all kinds of experts there. I didn't consider myself an expert. I don't have any college or scientific credentials. I haven't any degrees in sociology or anthropology, and I may not be qualified to take your job. By the way, why haven't you used your own experts? I know you got them." "Well, as a matter of fact, sir," Emery stated embarrassingly, "our company's only group of Sasquatch experts were initially sent out into the field, and they disappeared." Thomas let that last statement linger in the air between them for a moment as he watched Owen Flippo chop several pieces of firewood. Thomas admired how Flippo, as his partner referred to him, used the same pace as he used and also had that natural ease at manual labor that comes from a lifetime of hard work. "Am I wrong in assuming that you have investigated other organizations before deciding upon me?" Thomas asked. "Well, as a matter of fact, we have," replied Emery, "and my boss thinks that you're probably the only genuine non-governmental expert regarding these people." "People, you said?" Thomas quizzed. Why do you call them people?" "I've listened to every public podcast and conference tape that I could find regarding you, Mr. Robinette," Emery stated. "You're the only person that has gone out on a line publicly and said that you think Sasquatch is an independently evolved creature. Now, as a matter of fact, DNA tests have proven exactly what you guessed. Sasquatch is the most advanced primate indigenous to Earth. Their ancestors were around so long ago that the reason why they are on every continent is because they were on the first supercontinent before the plate tectonics pushed the continental land masses apart. They didn't come across the Bering Strait because, well, they were already here. Once this continent had as many large non-human primates as Africa still has, maybe even many more subspecies. When the first humans came here over from Asia some 21,000 years ago, they brought foreign diseases that the animals of this continent couldn't fight with their immune systems. The Sasquatch that welcomed the new arrivals even attempted to coexist and trade with the earliest humans, but those became sick from the trade, of course, and the contact. Eventually, every tribe became a hidden people that avoided humans because of the illnesses. They tried everything from interbreeding to open genocide, but they couldn't stop the flow of migrants from Asia. Eventually, they adopted the life of separation away from these Native American ancestors. And after a while, the hidden people began to become immune to those first diseases. And after a time, they were even tolerant of some tribes and taught them the trade sign languages. They successfully taught the first separate but equal teachings on this side of the world. When the Europeans came over, starting around 1100 AD, they began bringing new and more deadly diseases. The hidden people adapted a scorched earth policy with them. With the exploration of the Spaniards, the Sasquatch people went back into hiding. Despite their efforts, European diseases still spread to them until they were wiped out except for very small and isolated breeding populations. These populations have had around 500 years to adapt their immunities to these diseases and now are repopulating areas that were their traditional lands. As you have guessed, this is why the U.S. Department of the Interior set aside great tracts of land. The military can't control them like they did other tribes. Their ancestors were the same as the ancestors of chimpanzees and humans. It's currently hypothesized that they were actually the original primate branch of evolution, that they don't have our DNA, but they have their DNA. Now, that can open up a whole new can of worms. But that is my answer in as precisely as scientific terms as I can use that you'd understand. Well, Thomas excelled, I guess I have some of the answers I have been looking for, but I still don't understand what you think that I can do. I mean, I go out and find these people, as you call them now, and just sit and watch them. I don't even let them know that their presence is why I'm there. I set up a camp, cook red meat, play music, and just kind of wait. I use their curiosity against them so that I can see them, but they're always in control of the situation. I make it out alive because I've learned what to look for and what to anticipate so that I can leave them before things get bad. And if you've researched me, I'm often laughed at and ridiculed online. The experts think that I am their source of entertainment. Well, we still wish to employ your services, and money is no object, Emery stated. As a matter of fact, the boss's grandchildren were with the team of experts that went missing, and he has stated that he will spend up to half of his wealth to find them, dead or alive. His two grandchildren are adults. They're academics. Katie and Kevin Sinclair are the grandkids' names. Katie has a doctorate degree in primatology, and she had a minor in botany. And Kevin has his doctorate in anthropology. Kevin is 3 years her senior, but she's the boss of the pair. They're both in their early 30s. Kevin was groomed to become head of Leviathan International. So his life has been one type of training after another, dealing with everything from close combat, tracking, and wilderness survival. They're both competent in their skilled areas of expertise. Katie is a confident and independent third-generation wealthy female. She has a bit of a rebellious streak with her cultured temperament. Kevin, though high-strung in his attitude, he avoids conflicts because he knows how bad he can be. Along with them are a team of other established academics and field operatives. There were 6 security operatives, an expedition coordinator, a cook, and a forward scout. These personnel were all top professionals in their fields. It was a typical research discovery expedition. Along with Katie, there was another primatologist, name of Mary Ann Wright. Kevin's best friend, Eric Grant, was an anthropology professor at a very prestigious university in Western Europe. Accompanying them was a Jim Waller. He was a company geologist and also a lifelong mentor to the Sinclair siblings. Jason Johnson coordinated the expedition. His 7 men also doubled up as security operatives under his security commander, Marshall Black. Chris Wisdom, Truett Brown, Jack Levi, Brian Austin, and Hondo Pierce were their names. John Wilson Tate was their advanced scout on the mission, and the last person there was Caden Downs, the cook. Before you brush the statement aside, my boss is worth over 350 trillion US dollars in liquid assets alone. This expedition wasn't just a couple of kids running around in the woods spending Grandpa's money. See, they were looking for evidence of a possible relic community of hominids that science says has been extinct for millions of years. Preliminary reports stated that they felt that they were close to contact with something. They sent video and audio recordings back of, well, as you can understand, time is of the essence, and if you decide I need you to answer me now. I know that this is highly unorthodox, but we really need you. Just name your price and your conditions. It's already approved. Okay, Thomas said. I'll need some things when I get to where we're taking me, as I figure it's a ways from here. First of all, I take my shepherd with me everywhere. He's trained to protect me at all costs. He is my early warning system for approaching Sasquatches, and he is an advanced search and rescue training. Second, I need people that I can trust. I pick my team. Third, Owen Flippo is my first choice as a team member. He reeks of military experience and competence. Fourth, I have to maintain a communication system between myself and my wife. As a matter of fact, I need to call her, so you need to tell me where I'm going. Nothing specific so that she knows where I am, but it's for her peace of mind. Next, my fees are non-negotiable. I want to guarantee that I get paid $500 million in the event that I bring back his team or his grandchildren. If we find that they are already dead prior to this conversation, I get paid $100 million for my efforts. If I fail to come back, my wife gets $50 million for her loss, and each of my children gets $25 million for their loss of their father. Finally, I want someone competent here with my family in the event that something happens to me. They can help Sarah navigate the fallout. Thomas, I haven't heard anything so far that I haven't been authorized to do. In the event that you do successfully find those missing and bring them home, you will also be compensated by their parents, Emery said. Now, if you wish to call your wife, I will arrange for a helicopter to pick us up and fly us to Memphis Airport. With that, Emery stepped outside to make his phone call and began arranging their departure. "Hi, honey," Thomas said when Sarah picked up her call. "Hey, baby, what's up?" asked Sarah. "Well, I was contacted this morning by a company that wished for me to work on a temporary project for them as a Sasquatch advisor. And when we get off this phone, call the bank and check our balance. It's real. I just got that for signing an NDA contract, so I can't tell you much about what I'm going to be doing other than walking around in the woods teaching other men how to look for the old man. I do have to leave immediately, but it's no different than when someone calls me to come check out their property for them. I will call you in the morning when I get to my destination. Kiss the kids for me and tell Dad I'll see him later, so don't spoil the grandchildren." "Aw, baby," Sarah answered. "Go do your thing and get back as soon as possible. I was hoping that you would drive over for supper, but I guess that's out of the question now. I understand, though, and I'll be praying for you. Be careful, and don't forget you promised to call me in the morning. I love you always." With that, the phone lost a signal, and he hung up. "We're good to go as soon as I leash Jake and grab a few things," Thomas announced to Emery. He then went inside, grabbed a composite notebook, 3 ink pens, and Jake's training comm. These items he placed into a green duffel along with the holstered subcontact .45 caliber Smith & Wesson M&P shield that he always carried with him when he entered the woods. Besides the pistol, Thomas placed a K-bar knife into his bag, along with several Bic lighters, a canteen, and dog treats. As he headed out the back door, he locked the front door from inside and set the alarm system before he and Emery went out the back door. Thomas was surprised to see that all of his wood was chopped and stacked neatly by the fireside. Flippo and Gray had also taken the initiative to look inside his shed and grab a couple of tarps to cover the wood with. Now, he suspected that the 2 men had enjoyed chopping the wood, as it is something that he guessed they didn't get to do much of in their line of work. If he had anything to say about it, the next couple of weeks just may give Flippo plenty of time to chop wood. It wasn't long before the sound of helicopter rotors assaulted their ears. The driver of the SUV cranked it and left as soon as the helicopter landed. "The first thing that I'm going to need is an up-to-date dossier on all the missing party," Thomas said, as he buckled into his jump seat. "I want to be able to know the persons whom we're going after. I want to know everything from their favorite things to their experience in the wild. Well, just anything that'll give me an insight on how they're thinking under duress. I also need to know what type of activities the party was conducting. I need to know what their intentions were, what actions and protocols they were following, and any reports that they may have submitted before disappearing." He signaled Jake, and the dog jumped aboard the helicopter as if it was just an everyday occurrence for him. "Yes, sir." Emery wrote more notes in his composition notebook. "Where are we going exactly?" asked Thomas. "We are currently flying to Memphis Airport, where we will be sat down directly in front of a private hangar," Emery informed Thomas. "Then we will immediately board a private plane where we will be flown to Oregon. Once we're there, we'll be driven to what has become our advanced home base of operations for the search to recover this missing team. We will then assess what we have available and determine what we have to acquiesce for your success. If there's anything that you'd like to eat on your flight to Oregon, now's the time to place your order. Once you're in the air, you will be offered the opportunity to eat anything that you want. I suggest that you take your time in deciding, as this may be the last gourmet meal you eat for a while." "Sounds like you're having me order my last meal," Thomas shouted into the microphone connected to his headset. "In that case, I want a 32-ounce filet mignon and a loaded baked potato, a tossed salad with ranch dressing, hot sourdough rolls, watermelon, and a pecan pie. You also may wish to make sure that the pilot restocked the toilet paper." Everyone who heard that last comment laughed. "Jake probably should get at least a couple steaks as well. Also," continued Thomas, "I need detailed topo maps of the complete area that surrounds the missing party's last known camping site. I need a detailed map that also shows the smallest tributaries that flow down to the main watershed areas. And while you're at it, see if you can get me anything that tells me the migratory patterns of any large herds of ungulates for the last 3 years. I'm also going to need an expert tracker who's native to the area. And if you can find a Native American tractor from a local reservation who makes his or her living as a game hunting guide, that'd be the best." As Thomas Robinette listed his requests, Emery Letson made more notes in his composition notebook. After finishing his last notes, he waited for Thomas to continue. After giving him plenty of time to add other requests, Emery took out his cell phone and began typing text to various subordinates to make sure that what Thomas asked for was waiting for him when he boarded the airplane to fly to Oregon. He also made arrangements for weather-appropriate clothing to be waiting on the team when they arrived at the base camp. And after he sent his last text, Emery looked out the side door of the helicopter and viewed the farmland and houses that they flew over. He thought about how many of those persons below had never left the local area. Deep within the deepest recesses of his heart, he envied those people. Once the helicopter closed in on the airport in Memphis, Tennessee, the pilot notified the flight tower and advised the air traffic controller of his landing plan by the hangar bays in the back of the airport. He was given a trajectory course and cleared to land. The helicopter ride had only lasted a little over 30 minutes, but for Thomas, it seemed to have just begun when the craft landed. During the ride over, neither Easton Gray nor Owen Flippo had so much as said a word. From their demeanor, Thomas opined that riding in these kinds of crafts must have been a common thing in their lives. It wasn't surprising to him, as these two men both looked like they were career military men. He would never know what kind of places these men were dropped off by in one of these crafts. The lack of expression on their faces told him that they had every kind of confidence in their ability to handle just kind of whatever situation arose, with a clear mind and calm demeanor. Jake, watching out the window of the side door silently through the whole trip, quietly whimpered as the helicopter landed. Once the helicopter landed, the doors were pulled open by waiting attendants, and the 4 men and dog exited the helicopter. Without saying a word, Easton Gray and Owen Flippo walked through the entrance of the hangar that contained a 12-passenger Cessna airplane and boarded it. Easton was stopped by an assistant who handed him a document box that almost appeared to be heavy. Thomas had stopped next to Emery and was listening to the conversation about the contents of the box. When he realized that that box contained every document that he had asked for coming over from his house, he found a new respect for his new liaison. As the assistant, a young woman of around 25 years of age or so, an athletic build with long brown hair and chocolate eyes, was about to get back into the car that brought her to the airport and be driven away. Thomas requested that Emery provide him with an assistant to go over the documents. Emery called the assistant, Lacey McGee. He informed her that she would be needed on the flight over to Oregon, and that she should call his office, inform the paymaster that she would be working overtime. She made the phone call as she walked toward the plane after sending the driver back without her. An aroma akin to what smelled inside a top-ranked steakhouse permeated the fuselage. Thomas placed Jake in a cargo crate they just brought especially for the dog's comfort. The pilot informed everyone to take their seats, buckle up, then radioed the control tower that the plane was ready to depart. After the Cessna was airborne and set in its flight path, the pilot informed the passengers that they could move around the plane as they saw fit. Since the flight would last a little over 6 hours, then they should remain aware of turbulence while moving around in their area. After the announcement, Thomas was joined by Emery Letson, Lacey McGee, Owen Flippo, and Easton Gray. The fuselage was set up so that there could be business meetings conducted while in the air, so it had a conference table and comfortable chairs around it in the middle of the fuselage. Once all of them were seated at the table, 3 flight attendants entered the room bringing plates marked with each passenger's name on top of a black card with gold writing. As each one of them opened up their plates, Thomas noticed that everyone had the same foods as he had requested while he was en route to Memphis. "I didn't realize that I was ordering for everyone when I made my selections," Thomas apologized to everyone. "I hope that y'all like what I eat." "No need to apologize, Mr. Robinette," Easton Gray answered. "I'm just grateful that you're not a vegan who likes tofu stuff and rice like the last person who I flew with. It's a casual tradition with our company that when we hire a consultant for a temporary job, that we allow them to decide what the in-flight meal should be if we're taking a long flight." Emery told Thomas, "We get the formalities out of the way over a good meal. To make proper introductions, this is Mr. Thomas Robinette. He is our current expert that we've hired for the duration of this current search and rescue or recovery mission. Mr. Robinette, this is Lacey McGee. She is to be your personal assistant. She is former military analyst and a logistics expert. Please refer to her as Lacey." Then Emery introduced the last 2 men. "Although they have chopped your wood, I don't think that you've been formally introduced to them," Emery continued. "Of course, you've met the man on your right. He is Owen Flippo. He is a retired wilderness survival teacher who worked for the U.S. government training mountain survival to Special Forces operatives before coming to work for Leviathan International. He is my personal go-to guy when the figurative shit hits the fan. Please address him as Owen. The man on your left is Easton Gray. He was Owen's assistant when Owen retired. We felt that having him work for us under Owen's leadership would quickly advance your success. You can address him as Easton." "It's good to finally meet y'all officially," Thomas stated, "but don't go calling me Mr. Robinette or Sir. I prefer to be called Thomas. Mr. Robinette's my father, and I haven't reached the age where I'm comfortable with being called Mr. anything." "Well, let's all eat before the food gets cold," Emery offered. It was silent while everyone ate their meal. As he ate, Thomas thought about the situation at hand. It was almost an incredible set of circumstances that brought him to be among this group of individuals. If you had asked him any of their names just 24 hours earlier, he would not have known who he was being inquired about. As a matter of fact, 24 hours ago, his only worry in this world was how much firewood he was going to get chopped this weekend before his family returned from his father-in-law's home. He couldn't even begin to imagine what these companions were thinking as they ate silently. As he ate, he could hear Jake enjoying his meal as well. Dessert will be served momentarily, folks, the head waitress announced after everyone but Thomas had finished eating their main meal and salad. Thomas mentally calculated and quietly guessed that these new friends were more than likely used to inhaling their food because of their military backgrounds. He knew from stories told to him by his uncles that there had been times when his uncles had been at the mess hall and literally had 2 minutes to eat and board a helicopter to be deposited into some unknown location with no defined assurance of a next meal. This group reminded him of the same quietness that his uncles possessed during meal times when he'd shared with them all during his childhood and early adulthood before they had died off from old age or misfortune. "Thomas," Lacey began, "how much experience in the field have you actually had in close approximation of Sasquatch individuals?" "I honestly can't tell you," Thomas answered. "In the last 21 years of knowing about the existence of these creatures, I have spent countless hours, days, and weeks chasing them. I have let my obsession with them cause me to miss out on a lot of my family's memories. This journey has cost me one marriage and almost cost me this one. If it wasn't for the fact that Sarah has seen one of these things up close and personal like, I think that she would have left me as well. Since she understands the terror that these creatures can instill within the psyche of anyone who sees them, I believe that she understands why I feel an obligation to help others because I helped her deal with her situation. She still doesn't understand how I can be close to these things and not be afraid. However, that's just who I am. I've faced enough hardships in my lifetime, both physically and emotionally, that I have become grounded in my faith in God's promises. When you get to the point that someone or something threatening you is just them threatening you to send you home, death loses its sting and any fear of it dissipates." "I can understand what you say," Lacey answered, "but what gives you the confidence to stay in an area where multiple individuals are gathered? I mean, these things can kill a grizzly with their own bare hands." "I look at it like this," Thomas smoothly transitioned into his lecture voice. "Sasquatch looks at a man in the same way that a wolf looks at a coyote. Sasquatch and humans, we, are both upper primates, omnivores, and don't necessarily compete for the same resources. Wolves and coyotes, they're both canines and predators and carnivores that don't necessarily compete for the same foods. If a wolf encounters a coyote at a watering hole, the coyote is safe at least an estimated 85% of the time if the wolf is eaten, drank his fill of the water, and the coyote stays in a respectful distance and gives all due respect to the wolf. They may even go so far as to hang around the same area and even procreate with each other. However, if that wolf has had a bad week, hasn't caught anything to eat, or he's injured or old, or is just having a bad day, the wolf comes across that same coyote at that same water hole, that wolf's going to eat. That coyote ain't going home, and that wolf is going to survive. It's the same way with people and Sasquatch." "Well, that's a fascinating way to look at the situation," Lacey commented. "But how do you reconcile the accounts of individuals who say that they have had long-term relationships of trading food or gifting these creatures?" "Well, God protects fools," Thomas said. "But those people don't realize that when you give a Sasquatch something without expecting something of equal perceived value in return, the person thinks that they're being friendly. But the Sasquatch sees it as a show of weakness or fear and see the gift as a tribute of appeasement, going back to the wolf scenario. I believe that gifting humans are no more dangerous to a Sasquatch than a rabbit is to a wolf. Let's say for the sake of this conversation that two rabbits wish to be friends with a wolf. Every day or so they walk the woods and pick up bones off of carcasses and take them to the wolf. Then let's say that as time goes on, their interactions make the rabbits feel a connection with that wolf because they've never seen any aggressive behavior out of the wolf. Now one day, the rabbits can't find any bones, so they show up at their rendezvous spot and the wolf is waiting there. He's expecting food from the rabbits, so he didn't hunt that day. The rabbits walk up and greet the wolf. Then they tell the wolf that they apologize, but they couldn't find any bones in the wild that day. The wolf smiles, says that's okay, because he's going to eat here in a little while anyway. The rabbits are relieved that the wolf has made prior dinner plans. until he pounces upon them and devours both of them before they're able to escape. And that is how I view gifting. I can tell you that a lot of times when I've been called to come and visit a property where a family moved into a house, they're being harassed by a Sasquatch troop, or after about a month of living in their home, I would opine about 90% or greater of the time that people who lived in that same home before these who had just moved in either threw out their scraps after supper or willingly fed that family group before leaving for an extended period of time. How did you deal successfully with the 90% of the cases? Owen asked after becoming interested in what he heard. I mean, if what I read is true, these creatures can't control their emotions any better than a 2-year-old on average. They're very temperamental, unpredictable, moody, and they can go from docile to meat shredder in half a blink of an eye. How do you make a 10-foot tall and around 1,000-pound toddler do anything? That just sounded like the beginning of a very bad dad joke, but I still wonder. In my experiences, Thomas continued, I first acknowledge to them that I know that they're out there. I actually go to the wood line and speak with them just like they're decent people. I explain to them that the previous humans have moved out, that these humans aren't obligated to feed them, and that they should leave them alone. I tell them that there are boundaries now. The family who is living in the house will come out and tell them that they're going to be outside any given day, and that they don't mean to encroach upon their home, even though they may want to visit the quiet place and enjoy the beauty of the forest. I tell them that if they make their presence known in a non-threatening way, the family inside will respect that they are just using the area first, give them time to finish by going back inside. I will also try to tell the Sasquatch family that the family will try to be quiet and respectful during the day so that the Sasquatch group can sleep as long as the family group does the same at night. Basically, I try to talk out an agreeable solution. Talking to apes? Easton smirked. How did that work for you? Honestly. Well, only a handful of those times that I showed them that I was their equal, that I wasn't afraid of them, and gave them respect, did I not get the desired effect. With the majority of the handful of failures, I found that food was a non-negotiable part of the equation. In one case, an older African-American couple down in South Alabama that I was contacted by was having their garden raided just before the crops were harvested. Now, these boogers weren't going to stop no how, no why, no way. What worked, though, to stop them from stealing their food was that the old man went about 40 yards into the tree line where there was a big 50-foot clearing, and he tilled up the ground and planted corn, watermelons, tomatoes, and beans out there. He went back down to that garden when it began growing and pointed at the garden in the clearing and told the boogers there was their garden, and that the only reason he came into their house was to plant their own food there. He then pointed to his garden and said that that one was his and for them to stay out of his garden, and he would stay out of their garden. He never had any more problems after the garden began producing food. Now, as a matter of fact, his wife went out to sweep their back porch off one morning, and she found muddy handprints on their back porch. Now, they measured 17 inches across from thumb to pinky, and in between the handprint were 2 large watermelons, 6 ears of corn, and 3 tomatoes. The lady yelled out, "Thank you," and didn't even fuss about the muddy handprints on her porch. She actually sent me pictures of the scene. Have you actually had any encounters that were absolutely malicious? Emery asked after listening to the conversation for a while. Actually, yes, I have, Thomas answered. I've had 18 episodes where I saw the awesome and humbling aggression that these creatures are capable of. The first time I was bluff charged. Now, I ain't gonna lie, I dang near lost myself. I pissed all over my boots. I thought that I was gonna be missing in action for sure. The thing about it is that I never knew that the old man was even around until he stood up about 15 yards from me, screamed so loud that I froze in my tracks, and he covered that distance in about 3 seconds. Knocked me down on my ass and ran off. I still have the fingernail marks on my shoulder where he squeezed my shoulder as he passed by me. I now know that he was just counting coup on me and had no intention of killing me, but I didn't know that at the time. What I want to know, asked Easton, is if these things can be killed, how is it done, and what's the survivability of the situation? Yes, answered Thomas, these things can be killed. A 50 caliber bullet in between the eyes or to the base of the skull will put them down. Body shots will only make them mad. Even if they eventually die of the wound, you won't live to know it. Just like with bears, you can shoot them in the knees and slow them down, but that's luck more than accurate shooting. The problem with these creatures is that if you see one, he or she is the designated decoy to attract your attention. They're rarely alone because they're socializing animals. When you pull up your gun to shoot one, the three that you don't see will hit you from different sides and tear you apart. They live and breathe military-style ambush tactics. They also will place you inside a kill triangle, and you can't fight three fronts at the same time. Before I would even consider pulling a firearm out on one of these things, I have to resolve that I ain't going home, and I plan on leaving scars behind to remind them for years why they shouldn't have killed me. You mentioned counting coup earlier, Emery stated. Can you elaborate on that some more? Counting coup, answered Thomas, is an ancient form of bravery that many indigenous tribes around the world used to get battle glory. In a nutshell, it was more honorable to run up and touch an enemy combatant with a war club or hand than to actually kill the enemy. It inferred that the enemy was so weak that the warrior didn't consider him worthy of an honorable death. It also was an insult to the one who was hit because the coup taker was saying that even if he left the enemy alive, the enemy was unable to harm him in the future. After finishing his dialogue, Thomas took time to enjoy his dessert. He looked over to see Jake napping comfortably in his crate. The others had finished their desserts while he gave his dialogue lecture. His plates were collected, and the attendants completed clearing up as the 5 passengers moved to the more comfortable lounge area. Emery Letson poured everyone a tumbler of aged Hennessy cognac. Everyone took their tumbler except Thomas, who politely refused. He stated that he needed his full facilities to do his job properly. After a short, awkward silence, he opened the document box that was brought and looked over the dossiers of each of the missing persons in the lost party. He needed to know these persons as well as he could before he landed, if he had any chances of helping them, if he really could even help them at this point. Have you taken the time to really evaluate the situation? Thomas asked. With all due respect, they could already be dead. I don't believe this to be the case, Thomas, Emery answered, but we are prepared for dealing with whatever conditions we find the party's condition to be in. My only concern is how well prepared the expedition was to have to survive without their gear and their supplies, Thomas replied. Well, I have every confidence in Kevin Sinclair's ability to both lead and protect his companions. He has been trained all of his life for this very situation, Emery answered. I know this, because I was there for most of it. Well, and there you have it. Chapter 3, folks. Interesting. We're kind of headed in a different direction on this one. Looks like there's going to be a confrontation somewhere down the road. Sounds pretty exciting. Thank you very much. Joe Flippo, you're a good writer. Now, folks, enjoy your evening, the rest of it, and we'll talk again next time around this campfire. Till then, this is Clay Steele. Good night.